Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. So happy to be here with Clay at the National Council for the Social Studies Conference, this time in Boston, Massachusetts. And what brings you to this conference?
So I work for, first of all, thanks for having me on, Eric.
Yeah.
I am the Director of Partnerships and Outreach for a wonderful organization, a 501c3 organization called the Institute for Multipartisan Education. And so we've got a table here at the conference right next to you.
That's right.
And our whole deal is that we strive to help young people, specifically in high school and college, learn how to disagree curiously and have the sort of civil disagreements that are productive rather than contentious.
I'm assuming you get a lot of attention, therefore, because that seems to be one of the things that is desired in most schools these days, and even outside of school, that, we can do this. We've done it before. Mm-hmm. Let's continue it. So what are some of the big techniques that you employ when starting out working with a group?
Well, that's kind of the beauty of what we do is we're pretty adaptable. So we do things like we can do seminars, kind of one-time seminars, one-time assembly presentations. We could do, multiple workshops sort of over a number of weeks. We run a summer program it's like a fellowship program that teaches college kids all these like mediation and civil discourse skills that they can then bring to their college campuses. But a lot of it, I think, really comes down less to technique, not to say that there isn't techniques, less to technique, but more just to mindset. It's instilling this idea that if you disagree with curiosity and you come at a conversation, even over a very difficult topic, even with someone that you disagree with very, very strongly, with curiosity and with an open mind to just understand where they're coming from, which is not to say the same as you don't have to agree with them, but to understand where they're coming from, that value, instilling that value, motivates people to actually do that. And what you get out of those conversations then is a better understanding of the world. I mean, people disagree on all sorts of things. So if you can understand someone who disagrees with you, if you can understand their perspective, you just broaden your own mind. I'm forgetting the origin of this quote, but it's he who only understands his side of the argument understands little of that. And I should know this, and I'm completely drawing a blank, but that I think is a very true statement.
It is,
yeah.
And I'm so glad that we're paired up right next to each other in this hall because we share a very similar mindset and approach. One of the reasons that I do what I do, of trying to get people, and everybody that walks by, to talk to me about popular culture and therefore talk about themselves and their interests and their attitudes about things, is because of what you exactly just said, and that is we are all different people. There's no way that we're going to line up and be parallel to each other on every single thing. And in fact, there might be things that we are polar opposites of entirely, but having that kind of empathy, having the ability to recognize, well, the reason I am this way is because of my own life and my experiences and my own biases that have created. Other people have that too. It's not, everybody else isn't here just to kind of add atmosphere to our own lives. They are leading their own lives too. So it seems like we are on the same path, absolutely. You mentioned you had your own podcast. Is that connected to the...
No, that's my own. That's not connected to IME. I'm at Columbia right now. I'm a student at Columbia, and I co-founded the campus community, the Heterodox Academy campus community at Columbia. So if you've ever heard of Heterodox Academy, it's another nonprofit organization that is really actually quite similar to IME's mission, is trying to get a more of a plurality and diversity of outlook and ideology on college campuses, and then help give students at those college campuses the skills. I should say both students and faculty the skills and the platform to explore those disagreements in a civil, respectful way.
Are you feeling that so at a place like Columbia, what indications do you get from people there of their social studies experience leading up to college? That they are arriving feeling prepared for that big step of being not just at a university, but a top-tier university at Columbia. Where do they pull from when it comes to social studies?
Well, I have to say my perspective on this is a little unique and perhaps not the most informative one. I'm what's called what Columbia, I guess, refers to as a non-traditional student. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people don't know this. Columbia has more student veterans than every other Ivy League combined, and I'm among them. So I'm a little older. I'm in my late 20s. And we're in a sort of slightly separate school. It's very integrated with the rest of the college. But I don't spend as much time, that is to say, with what the CC students, the Columbia College, the traditional high school age students. Though I will say, from what I have seen, and I'm a politics major, so I kind of spend time in classrooms that deal with things like social studies and history and politics. And I'm in class with those younger kids, and I have to say they do seem quite well informed. It's a top tier university. These kids are pretty well educated, and they do know their stuff. So I'm not pessimistic about it. Yeah.
So like AP everything is
right. Yes.
They've been there and they worked really hard through school, and I'm just curious because part of what we're doing at this particular table today is, I'm doing my podcast, but I'm also just kind of getting a feel from everybody here of the state of social studies education nationwide, and maybe providing a compare and contrast moment for New Hampshire. Well, to segue to the other aspect of this, I brought with me a whole bunch of stuff related to both Boston, where we are, and New Hampshire, where I'm from. And what better band to talk about, musical group, than Aerosmith, who have its origins in New Hampshire, in Lake Sunapee area, but became a recognized band here in Boston. And we were both doing the how often this kind of thing happens where it's like, hey, I like this, but I like that. And next thing you know, we're finding out that we narrowed down the exact song.
Yes.
That we
have
love.
a mutual favorite song.
So I'm a longtime Aerosmith fan. That was like my first, I was talking before I hit record, Ramones did it for me, but Aerosmith was my first. It was the first group that I was able to claim that I discovered. It wasn't my parents. Right. It's from their era, but they didn't really listen to Aerosmith. I got to discover Aerosmith myself. Do you have a similar experience with Aerosmith?
No, I guess I have the exact opposite, because my dad had some Aerosmith CDs that he would play in the car, and that's how I found out about him. So for me, it was not discovering it on my own It was my dad kind of passing. I get a lot of my musical taste for classic rock specifically from my father, so it's very much in that story.
Yeah. They are just, that being said, my parents did have that greatest hits record. The red one with the wings on it.
Yes, that's exactly the one my dad had, yeah.
My parents had it, and when I started getting into Aerosmith, I was, looking at their record collection, I'm like, oh, you have this? Like, how come you've never played it? And and to be honest, they didn't actually play a lot of the records that they had for whatever reason. But anyway, the particular song that we both share in is Back in the Saddle Again.
Such a good song.
What does that evoke for you when you hear that song?
Ooh, that's a good question. Emotionally, it strikes me as a sort of it's a comeback song. Obviously, right? It's in the title, so it gives you that feeling of all right, I mean, literally, I'm like referencing this song in the lyrics so heavily. You're getting back on the horse, right? So one of the reasons I love the song, and I think we were also talking about this before we started recording as well, is it's like the perfect montage song for this movie. Then they use it in the movie called The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg and Batman. Christian Bale. Thank you. Oh my God, I'm doing terrible with actors today. Amy Adams.
Amy Adams.
Yeah.
It's actually when he's in New Hampshire.
Yes.
In Hampton Beach, and Mickey Ward is about to fight, and they're in the elevator together.
Yes.
They walk across the street to get to the venue, and then with that first blow, right? You hear
that
Steven
slow
Tyler,
motion, the punch going in. Yeah.
It has the best lead in.
It's so good.
And then you hear Steven Tyler.
Yes.
And,
and you got this great montage of, and the reason it's so perfect for the film is it's Mickey Ward's comeback. It's him getting his groove back, his rhythm, his stride, and this just perfect song, the feel of the song, the tempo, it fits this montage so well. And I feel like the film, that part of the film embodies the vibe and the ethos of the song perfectly.
That movie, it came from an era. I make it sound like it's years ago. It was what, 12 years ago. That movie
and it's
out,
maybe about a decade, give or take.
But it came from a time period where there's a lot of movies like that, which just like the emotions just snuck up on you.
Yeah,
you know, like you're watching it, like just thinking about it sometimes. The very end when he's fighting in England, right? And Christian Bale's character, his brother, is saying, "Do it for Lowell." Do it. And I'm like, it gives me shivers because like it's like this ultimate. He's the fighter, He's the working class hero of a working class city and a community, and like he's in this alien land, sticking up not just for, and you would think is kind of like Rocky IV type thing, like he's here for America, USA. No, he's specific to Lowell, right?
Yeah.
He is representing Lowell, and I think that's such a powerful scene. And the director, I don't know who directed that movie, but
I'll look that up. Oh, by the way, that quote I referenced earlier, I had to look it up as well. John Stuart Mill.
Okay.
I was 80% sure it was. I didn't want to misquote, but it was John Stuart Mill. Anyway, I will also look up the director of that movie because he deserves a shout out.
Or she, I wonder.
I wonder.
But they masterfully put all the stuff in there to make you feel like you're in New England. It's such a New England movie, and you can't do that without Aerosmith. So I have one of the things that I have not on my table but connected on my website is a live Aerosmith recording from 1984 from right here in Boston. And guess what song they open up with? Back in the Saddle.
Perfect opener, too. Perfect opener.
And he doesn't say, "I'm back in the saddle." He starts the first time, it says, "I'm back in Boston again." I bet the crowd was going wild because what a cool thing. So the question I pulled for this is, what ideas or behavior does this convey? I think you summed it up already. A little bit. It's a comeback song.
Right.
It definitely has some Western themes to it.
Oh, yeah.
Going to the town. But kind of sounds like a Marty Robbins song.
Yeah.
That one from that extra long epic song that he, out in the West Texas town of El Paso. That one. It kind of, I feel like there are similar kind of themes to it. But where was Aerosmith? Even if we don't know for sure, what do you assume must have been?
Well, my knowledge on Aerosmith's history as a band is a little limited, but I mean, at the time, if I'm correct, as I understand it, they were probably dealing with a lot of the same issues a lot of bands were dealing with, which was drugs, alcoholism, and how that sort of derails you from the goal of making good music and performing great shows. And so I can't help but, I guess, make an educated guess that that song has something to do with coming back from sort of a low point regarding addiction, alcoholism, etc. So I don't. That would be my stab at it. But you probably know more about the history than I do.
I do, but I don't. I know it's kind of just, and I'm sure they would. It was a blur for them.
Yeah, probably.
For me as well. But I think I would say Aerosmith represents sort of like that I don't know if it's second generation or third generation rock and rollers. You know, their influences run pretty deep in the blues, but also in early rock and roll, a lot of
Big time.
60s stuff. I think they actually started out as, like, when they would play here in Boston and were getting to be known, they started out as, I think, a Yardbirds cover band. They would do like half their set Yardbirds songs and then their own stuff after intermission. And so they kind of represent this midway point for the rock and roll story where they were indulging in the world that was created around that, where you have
Right.
like, you know, this new generation of rock and roll fans who were not, you know, they weren't Buddy Holly fans, they were Led Zeppelin fans. You know, like they're moving up with their
Right.
their interests, and that culture is not one that really promotes clean living.
Yeah, not a lot of drinking of kombucha and meditating, right? Well, I guess in the 60s there's a little bit of that, but not exactly healthy eating.
Right. They weren't like the Beach Boys going and Mike Love
Right.
doing, you know, his tantric.
They liked the party. Yeah.
Right. They were there to party, and they. But this song is what seems to me is almost like an early comeback song, because if I'm not mistaken, it's a 70s song.
Yeah, when was the release?
It wasn't really until the 80s that Aerosmith seemed to have had this rebirth, that they were over all their problems. Like Joe Perry was out of the band for a little while. There's one of, it may have been this album. I think it's Night in the Ruts. He didn't play guitar on that. And
Really?
so it's like, maybe it's speaking to like, now we're all back, right? This is the band that we were meant to be, because I think after that, until recently, they were just the same exact band. Like they've never changed lineups ever since the late 70s.
Interesting. Okay, so I had to look this up. So first of all, it was David O. Russell that directed The Fighter.
Okay.
And the song we were referencing was released on March 22nd, 1977. So you're right, it is a late 70s song. And
It seems kind of early for their comeback, though.
It does seem a little early. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
But it doesn't. I guess Steven Tyler kind of represents a lot of people who struggle with addiction.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's since gone back. I mean, that's why they haven't toured as much. Like they're supposed to be doing this final tour, and things keep getting in the way, including his struggles with addiction. And so, I wonder if it's representative of that too, where it's a lifelong ordeal. Each time you think you're back, right? You're with a blaze of glory. You're back, looking, excited about this, but you know that might be something that could easily stop that.
Yeah. I mean, addiction is, I'm not the first person to point this out, but it's something that people who struggle with tend to struggle with their entire lives. And I personally, I have people in my close circle of friends and family who have struggled with addiction, and it's a constant battle. And being very famous and wealthy does not exempt you from that. And in fact, being highly creative, there does seem to be a correlation between that creativity and that openness, that sort of emotional intelligence that a lot of artists tend to have, and that creative intelligence that seems to be correlated with a propensity for addiction.
Because easily by 1977, Aerosmith had proven themselves not just a flash in the pan. They weren't just writing some short-lived version of hard rock music being popular. They were the genuine article, and their creativity,
Absolutely.
their ability to, set trends was instilled. Like it would be a long time before they were competing the other way. It wasn't really until the 90s that they were trying really hard to stay relevant by making music that sounded like everything else on the radio. For a good long while, they were the ones who set the standard.
I will defend that song from Armageddon. It is a good one. Don't want to miss a thing.
Ballads, yeah.
It is a good song. It's a little, produced and blah 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 blah, but it's a great song.
The one that really stands out to me is Just Press Play. It's not a good song, and it was just like, and then after that they had another rebirth, or kind of like a renaissance, where I think their next record after that one was Honking on Bobo, which was like their blues album, and it was like a bunch of old blues songs. And I remember when that one was coming out, they're like, we're going back to our roots.
Yeah.
We're going back to what we're originally from.
Bands that do that, in my opinion, rarely go wrong. So few people know about this. When I was a kid, the big like musical genre was like pop punk and emo, right? And I remember being a really big fan of Fall Out Boy, and they have a couple that albums, their first few albums that are, if you like that style of music, are really, really good. But then later in their career, they went very overproduced, very kind of poppy, and I think those albums are just not good at all. However, they, in the middle, right as they started to come back after a hiatus and started making a lot of the music that you didn't like, there was this one album they made, I think it was called Pax AM Days, and it was pure punk. It was the most punk thing they've ever done, and it is one of, if not their best albums, in my opinion. And no one knows about it, and no one ever seems to talk about it. I mean, it's just this like random little part of their discography that is so good. And it strikes me that Aerosmith did something very similar with that blues record.
Because you run the risk, it's a business. Once you get popular as a musician and you want to do that as a living, it's a business. So you run that risk of annoying your fans that you originally picked up because they liked your original sound.
Right.
But you also want to bring in new fans, right? And so to be innovative, to be creative, to try new things. Remember when Jewel tried to go pop and she claimed after it flopped, she's like, oh, it was a joke. I was never. I'm like, no, you were testing the waters. You wanted to see if, whatever that song was called with your dance numbers and stuff, if that caught on, that was going to be your new thing. Taylor Swift has been very successful in doing that.
Yeah, you almost forget she was a country artist.
Right, she sounds and looks nothing like when she started out.
She did that very well.
And so it's like, that's what you do. So like Aerosmith, Fall Out Boy, the list could go on where it's like, it's a gamble. You're rolling the dice of like, okay, I want to get more people listening to my music. Should I meet them where they are? Or should I just hope that they like what I do all the time? Because Aerosmith, they have a couple other songs that have that kind of same kick butt sound too.
Oh yeah.
Back in the Saddle Again. In the 90s, they have like their crazy, crying, amazing, Alicia Silverstone video trilogy, which kind of all sounds like the same song. It's all the ballads from Get a Grip, but it was like they were still Aerosmith. Like you can't take that away from them. It's like they've made themselves a huge place at the table, and so we have a little bit of wiggle room. We can do ballads, we can do stuff like that.
Another band that comes to mind, they're not quite as old as Aerosmith, but I saw Queens of the Stone Age.
Oh yeah.
In Queens, New York. And they released a new album, I think earlier this year or late last year, and it's a great album. And they perform live like they are still in their 20s, like leather pants, like high heel rock and roll boots, and they still have it. And it's like they've been a band for like 30 years, and they still sound like Queens of the Stone Age. They still have the creativity, the passion. That is a band that I think will continue to be able to do that and for another 10, 20 years. And
they don't have to give in to the flavor of the month. Like they've made their own flavor.
Exactly.
And it's like either taste what we're having. And that's a group, that kind of emerged from that era of, I talk about the 90s again, like it's 30 years ago. They emerged from that like kind of stagnant point in rock and roll history. Not a lot of stuff going on that was really unique and creative. But they created almost like a gothic sound. Like I really like their...
Oh, they came out of a really unique scene. It was not... I mean, they were playing at the same time as the grunge guys, but they were all SoCal. So like the exact opposite of New England, right? Like the exact opposite of Aerosmith. Clear other side of the country, right? But the sort of desert scene in Southern California had this really weird, unique thing going on. So yeah, they very much forged their own sound.
Wasn't Dave Grohl involved in them?
Yeah, he was. For their probably their most famous album, Songs for the Deaf, he was their drummer.
That's right.
Yeah,
because that's like when they started showing them at MTV a lot.
Right.
It was,
right.
I remember it. Well, Clay, I can't thank you enough for doing this, and I'm sure we're going to talk some more because we're going to be right next to each other for the next
the whole
couple
10,
days.
10 hours, yeah.
But this has been a lot of fun and a great way to start NCSS.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on, Eric.
Take care. Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything as a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.